It all started on what should have been a regular night out, just dinner, laughs, and time with someone special. But what unfolded in this busy, upscale restaurant turned into something so unexpected, so tense, it had every diner frozen mid-bite. You're not going to believe how quickly a simple misunderstanding spiraled when a black couple, just trying to enjoy their meal, found themselves being watched a little too closely by a waitress who seemed convinced they didn't belong. Within minutes, she called security, but it's what happened next that will completely change how you see the story. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for it, because the manager's reaction didn't just defy expectations. It set the entire restaurant on edge and had people picking sides fast. Now, before we dive in, I want you to pause and think, have you ever witnessed something that made you question what was really going on beneath the surface? That feeling of discomfort, of wondering whether someone was being treated fairly, or if something deeper, more uncomfortable, was unfolding right in front of your eyes? That's exactly what the story taps into. You clicked on this video because you wanted answers, and you're going to get them. But the truth is layered, and the power play that took place that night goes beyond one incident. It opens a conversation about bias, about how we respond under pressure, and about standing up when it's easier to stay quiet. You, watching this right now, are part of that conversation, because by the end you'll be asking yourself, what would you have done? This isn't just a viral moment. This is the kind of story that grabs you and won't let go. So don't click away, because once you hear what the manager did after the call was made, you'll see why this video has everyone talking. And just when you think you figured out who's right and who's wrong, everything flips. You won't believe what the security footage revealed. The night had started like any other, with the warm hum of conversation filling the restaurant, soft lights reflecting off the polished tables, and the clinking of glasses offering a gentle background score. In the middle of it all, a black couple sat near the window, casually browsing the menu, unaware of the curious eyes watching them. The couple, both in their early 30s, had just moved to the area a few months ago and were eager to experience the fine dining scene in their new city. They had been to this particular restaurant a few times already, but tonight felt different. The atmosphere, thick with the buzz of business professionals, families, and the occasional date night, seemed to carry an unspoken air of exclusivity. It was a place where everyone wanted to be seen. The restaurant's reputation for impeccable service and mouth-watering cuisine made it one of the top spots in town, and the waitstaff were known to be attentive, almost to the point of being overly eager. But not everyone shared the same level of enthusiasm for the couple's presence. It was a waitress who noticed them first, standing by the station, her sharp eyes scanning the room. Her job was simple: take orders, serve food, and make sure everyone felt comfortable. But as she caught sight of the couple, something stirred within her. It wasn't that they were doing anything wrong. Far from it. But something about them just didn't sit right with her. Maybe it was the way they held their conversation, quiet but confident. Or perhaps it was the fact that they didn't fit the usual profile of the restaurant's clientele. People dressed in expensive suits, sipping on fine wine. They looked out of place. As she hovered near the kitchen, she fought the feeling gnawing at her, but eventually her curiosity got the better of her. She glanced over her shoulder, double-checking the couple as they continued to look over the menu. A quick exchange of glances with another staff member confirmed her suspicion. There was something off about them. So she did what many people would do in that situation. She decided to keep a closer eye on them. It wasn't just their mannerisms or the way they dressed. It was something deeper, something instinctive. As much as she tried to rationalize it, she couldn't shake the feeling that they didn't belong here, at least not in the way the regulars did. The manager, who had been moving to the restaurant overseeing the evening's operations, could sense a subtle change in the air. There had been an uptick in complaints. Quiet murmurs from other diners, side eyes exchanged among the staff. The tension was palpable. He had noticed the couple too, but he dismissed it, chalking it up to nothing more than nerves. After all, it wasn't unusual for people new to a fine dining experience to seem uncomfortable. It was part of his job to make sure everyone felt welcome. But the waitress's behavior, her quick glances and overly attentive posture, set off a small alarm in his mind. He wasn't sure what was going on, but something felt off. And that's when it happened. The waitress, in a near whisper, asked the manager to come over. Her voice was tight, a mix of uncertainty and something more. "I think there might be a problem," she said, not looking directly at the couple. Her eyes kept darting to their table, her hand shaking slightly as she folded the napkin in front of her. "What kind of problem?" the manager asked, his voice casual, though his eyes followed the direction of her gaze. "I'm not sure," she replied, her voice barely audible. "But something about them. I don't think they're supposed to be here. They're not regulars, and I think they're not dressed right for this place." The manager paused, absorbing the words. The waitress's unease was palpable, and he knew from experience that when an employee came to a complaint like this, it wasn't something trivial. It had to be dealt with immediately, even if it seemed like a minor issue. He took one last look at the couple, quiet, peaceful, with no visible signs of causing trouble, and then turned to the waitress. "Just let me handle it. Don't make a scene," he said, his tone gentle but firm. He knew how quickly things could escalate in situations like this, especially when class and race dynamics were at play. He had seen it happen before. But as he made his way over to the couple's table, something felt off. The atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted, and he could sense that the tension had grown. This wasn't just about a dress code violation or a miscommunication. There was a layer of discomfort in the air, and it was spreading. The manager approached the table, his steps deliberate but measured. He didn't want to alarm the couple, but he needed to address the situation. "Good evening," he said with a professional smile. "I hope you're enjoying your meal. Is there anything I can assist you with?" The couple looked up, startled by his sudden appearance. The woman smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes, and replied, "No, everything's fine. We're just deciding on our entrees." The manager nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He smiled again, his voice turning slightly more formal. "I'm just checking to make sure everything is to your satisfaction. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask." As he turned to leave, he glanced over his shoulder, trying to read their faces. There was something about their expression, an unsettling calmness, that made him pause. But he pushed it away. Maybe he was overthinking it. After all, this was his first time managing a restaurant. He had dealt with all sorts of customers, and he knew how to manage a situation like this. However, as he walked back to the kitchen, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something. There was something more happening here, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. And as soon as he reached the kitchen, he heard it, the unmistakable sound of raised voices. The waitress had called security. It was at that moment the entire situation took a drastic turn. The manager's mind raced, and he knew he needed to act fast before everything spiraled out of control. What was going to happen next would forever change how the restaurant handled its customers. And as the security guard approached, tension thickened the air. The couple's reactions were about to reveal even more than anyone could have anticipated. But just as things began to unfold, a phone call came through for the manager, one that would throw everything into chaos. Would the security guard show up just in time? Would the manager defuse the situation before it escalated? Or would this become a night everyone would remember for the wrong reasons? As the video continues, you'll discover how the situation reaches a boiling point, and how the truth behind the waitress's call and the manager's decisions will shock everyone. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just about a misunderstanding at a fancy restaurant. The way this story unfolds will make you think twice about the invisible biases that influence our lives every day. Stick around to see what happens next. The truth is far more complex than you could ever imagine. The situation at the restaurant was quickly devolving into something that no one had expected. As the manager stepped into back room, the unsettling realization hit him. He had made a mistake by brushing off the waitress's concerns. There was something more brewing beneath the surface, something deeper than just a dress code violation or a minor misunderstanding. His initial instinct had been to ignore the unease he felt, to chalk it up to usual nerves that come with managing a high-end establishment. But now, standing in the kitchen, the loud voices of security guards murmuring and moving toward the dining area made it all too clear. This wasn't just a small issue. This was about to get much worse. Outside, the couple remained seated, unaware how their quiet dinner was about to be disrupted. The woman glanced at her partner, her fingers tapping nervously on the table as she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She knew something was off, but she couldn't quite figure out why. The sudden appearance of the manager had made her uneasy, and the fact that he hadn't seemed to care about her response to his earlier question only added to her sense of dread. They had been to this restaurant before, never feeling like outsiders, never feeling like their presence should be questioned. But tonight, everything felt different. The energy had shifted in a way she couldn't explain. Meanwhile, the waitress lingered in the background, her eyes darting between the couple and the manager, as though she was waiting for something to happen. Her instincts had told her that something was wrong, and she hadn't been able to let go of the feeling. As she stood there, watching the scene unfold, she couldn't shake the thought that something much darker than a simple misjudgment was at play. There was a tension in the air, something that hinted at underlying prejudices far more pervasive than she had anticipated. When the security guard arrived, the mood in the room became even more charged. He was a large man, tall and imposing, with the kind of presence that immediately silenced a room. His eyes scanned the table where the couple sat, his gaze lingering just a second too long, as though deciding whether they belonged there. It was a subtle but telling glance, the kind of look that sent an icy chill through the couple. The woman's fingers clenched into fists under the table, and she could feel her partner's body tense up beside her. He, too, could sense the shift in the atmosphere, the subtle hostility now hanging between them and the staff. Without a word, the security guard stood a few feet away, his arms crossed as if waiting for some signal. The manager was still nowhere to be seen, and the couple was left to wonder if they were about to be kicked out for reasons they couldn't fully comprehend. The silence that stretched between them was unbearable, the only sound coming from the soft clinking of silverware against plates from the nearby tables. The moment of truth came when the manager finally returned, looking frazzled and more anxious than before. He had received a phone call that had completely thrown him off course, a call from someone important at the restaurant's corporate headquarters. The phone call had thrown everything into chaos, and the manager wasn't sure what was happening anymore. All he knew was that the situation had escalated quickly, and now he had to deal with it. He walked over to the couple's table, his footsteps slow and deliberate. There was a sense of tension in his movements, as though he was trying to hide something, trying to mask the inner turmoil he was feeling. The couple looked at him expectantly, their eyes wide with confusion and growing apprehension. The man opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the manager cut him off with a hurried gesture. "I'm so sorry," the manager began, his voice tight. "We've had a misunderstanding, but I assure you, everything is fine. I just need to ask you both to come with me for a moment. There's been a bit of an issue with your reservation." The woman's heart skipped a beat. A reservation issue? They hadn't made a reservation, but it seemed odd that the manager would bring it up now, at this moment. Still, she nodded, glancing at her partner for confirmation. They stood up, their chairs scraping against the floor, and followed the manager toward the back of the restaurant. As they walked, the energy in the room shifted again, more stares, more whispers. The feeling of being watched, of being the center of attention, was now impossible to ignore. In the back, the manager led them into a small storage area near the kitchen, where a few staff members stood, eyes shifting nervously between the couple and the security guard. The room was dimly lit, filled with a hum of cooling fans and the faint smell of cleaning supplies. It was cold, sterile. The manager closed the door behind them, leaving them in an eerie silence that only heightened the tension. "I apologize for this inconvenience," the manager began, his voice now sounding more strained than before. "There's been an incident that I need to address. It's just protocol, and I don't want to make this any more uncomfortable than it has to be." The couple exchanged looks, their minds racing. Something was happening that they couldn't quite understand, something bigger than just an ordinary misunderstanding. The woman took a step forward, her voice shaky but determined. "What exactly is going on here?" The manager hesitated, and for a moment, it seemed like he was debating how to respond. Finally, he sighed. "It's about how we've been handling things. The staff is, well, they've been reacting to situation in ways they shouldn't. There's been an issue with how the other patrons perceive you. They've raised concerns, and it's gotten out of hand." The woman's eyes narrowed, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. "What are you saying? That we're not welcome here?" The manager's face flushed with embarrassment, but he didn't deny it. "I'm just trying to make sure this doesn't escalate. The last thing I want is for this to turn into something that reflects badly on the restaurant. But the truth is, the atmosphere here has become uncomfortable for everyone. I just want to smooth things over." The couple stood there, stunned, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had come for a quiet night, just an evening out like anyone else. But now, they were trapped in a room with the walls closing around them, the reality of the situation settling in. They were being forced to confront something much darker than they had expected, something no one had warned them about when they walked through the door. But then, just as the tension reached its peak, there was a knock at the door. The manager flinched, clearly startled by the interruption. He opened it just a crack, and when he saw who was standing there, his face drained of color. Standing in the doorway was someone he hadn't expected to see, the head of the restaurant chain's corporate security. The man had a stern look on his face, his eyes cold and calculating. "We need to talk," he said, stepping into the room without waiting for an invitation. The atmosphere in the room shifted yet again, this time an added layer of foreboding. The woman's stomach churned as she realized that what had started as a simple, uncomfortable situation was now something far more dangerous. She didn't know who this man was, but the tension radiating from him was unmistakable. Something was about to break wide open, and the fallout was going to be massive. But what happened next would completely alter the course of the evening, revealing hidden truths and forcing everyone to reckon with the consequences of their actions. What had started as a simple misunderstanding would soon explode into something no one could have predicted. The atmosphere in the storage room shifted once again as the corporate security had stepped in, his cold eyes scanning the room, appraising every person present like a judge preparing to hand down a sentence. He looked past the manager, who seemed to shrink under the weight of the stranger's gaze, and lock his eyes on the couple, as if searching for some sign of guilt or complicity. His presence was overwhelming, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The couple stood frozen, unsure of what would happen next, as the tension in the air became suffocating. The security head didn't speak right away. Instead, he walked over to a small table in the corner of the room, picked up a tablet, and began tapping it furiously. Every movement felt deliberate, as if he were carefully crafting the next chapter of this unfolding drama. The couple exchanged a glance, trying to understand who this man was, why he was here, and what he knew. Whatever had been brewing all night was about to come to a head. "What's going on?" the woman finally asked, her voice trembling but firm. She could feel the weight of the manager's eyes on her, his discomfort palpable, but it was the security head who truly seemed to hold all the power in this room. The security head paused, his fingers hovering over the tablet screen, before he spoke. "You're here because a series of complaints have been filed against you, not just tonight, but over the past few weeks. We've been tracking your visits to this restaurant, and there's been a pattern." He glanced at the manager, who flinched at the mention of the complaints, before continuing. "It's about your behavior, your actions. Your presence here doesn't fit the narrative we want to create for our customers." The couple's hearts sank as they processed his words. The idea that they had been targeted, that their mere presence was somehow an issue, was unsettling. It didn't make sense. Why would anyone complain about them simply enjoying a meal together? The woman's mind raced, the injustice of the situation beginning to settle in her bones. The manager, who had been standing silently in the corner, finally spoke, his voice low and apologetic. "I know. I wasn't aware of the full extent of the complaints," he admitted, his eyes darting between the couple and the corporate security head. "But I should have done something sooner. I should have realized that something wasn't right, but I didn't." The woman's gaze sharpened, her mind starting to piece together the fragments of the night. The cold treatment at the door, the way the waitress had looked at them, the subtle dismissals they had received. It was all starting to add up. They had been singled out, not for any wrongdoing, but because of something far more sinister, something that had nothing to do with their behavior and everything to do with who they were. But just as she was about to speak, to demand answers, the security had raised his hand, cutting her off. "You don't understand. This isn't just about you. It's about what you represent. People like you." He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes flicking to the manager, who was now visibly sweating, his entire body tense. It was as if something was weighing heavily on him, something he hadn't yet revealed. The room fell into silence, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. The woman's heart pounded in her chest, the reality of the situation settling over her like a dark cloud. She wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Had she walked into a trap? Was she being set up for something far worse than a bad dining experience? Suddenly, the manager took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I need to tell you the truth," he said, his voice cracking. "This isn't just a restaurant issue. This goes higher up. This is part of a larger campaign, a campaign that targets certain individuals based on their demographics. And I've been part of it, without even knowing what I was getting involved in." The woman's eyes widened, her mind reeling. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice rising in disbelief. "You've been part of this? You've been allowing this to happen?" The manager nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. The complaints weren't from customers. They were fabricated, orchestrated by people within the company. They've been systematically targeting individuals like you, keeping track of your every move, your every visit, in an attempt to discourage people who don't fit the image they want to present. People of color, people from marginalized communities. They don't want you here, and they've used me to make sure you don't feel welcome." The woman was speechless, her mind struggling to process the depth of the betrayal. This wasn't just a random act of discrimination. It was a calculated, corporate-driven scheme designed to make people like her and her partner feel unwelcome, to force them out of spaces they had every right to occupy. The security head, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up, his tone dark. "This is bigger than you think. The restaurant chain is in the process of rolling out a new image campaign. It's about promoting an atmosphere that appeals to a certain demographic, one that aligns with the values of our corporate stakeholders. And unfortunately, you don't fit that image." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She could feel the weight of the injustice bearing down on her, the realization that this wasn't just an isolated incident, but part of a much larger, deeply ingrained system of exclusion. But then, just as everything seemed hopeless, the unexpected happened. The manager, now fully aware of the scale of the problem, took a stand. "I can't be part of this anymore," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "I've been complicit in a system that hurts people, that ostracizes individuals for no reason other than their identity. I'm not going to let this happen any longer." He turned to the couple, his eyes filled with determination. "I will help you. I'll make this right. You deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, just like any other customer in this establishment. No one should ever have to face discrimination like this. I'm going to expose this, and I'll make sure the people responsible are held accountable." The woman looked at him, her heart racing. She wasn't sure she could trust him, but something in his eyes told her that he was serious. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for justice. As the manager made his decision, the security head's face darkened. "You can't just walk away from this," he warned. "There are consequences. You'll lose everything if you try to fight this." But the manager stood his ground, his voice unwavering. "I'd rather lose everything than continue to be a part of something so wrong." The couple, still shaken but now filled with a renewed sense of purpose, nodded in agreement. They knew that this wasn't just about one night, one restaurant, or one unfair situation. This was about something much bigger, fighting against an unjust system that had long been in place, and making sure their voices were heard. The manager, along with the couple, would soon take the necessary steps to expose the truth, to bring the corrupt practices to light, and to ensure that those who had been marginalized for too long could finally find a place where they belonged. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but they knew it was the right thing to do. They were no longer just victims of the system. They were warriors, standing up for what was right. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of inner strength and resilience. Until next time, stay strong, stay brave, and never forget your worth.